kind of hilarious because, right, this time last year when the world stopped, we knew that when the economy restarts, the year-on-year rate of change of economic data is going to look ridiculous. And all of us said, oh my God, the inflation prints are going to look like 4%, 5%, et cetera, et cetera. And everyone's going, yeah. The Fed was saying, listen, the data's going to look stupid when it gets to this time of year. Everyone goes, oh yeah. Comes this time of year, everyone goes, oh, panic, inflation. And it's kind of madness, right? Now, so there's a couple of things going on. I've talked a bit about this before, is obviously there are still supply issues. So we would put supply issues in transitory inflation issues.
Right, definitely.
Restarting of the economy, that kind of stuff, the inability to get labor, so some wages go up, rent prices catching up, you know, all of this, transitory. Doesn't mean it goes away again. It's kind of, the increase in prices actually sticks, but the rate of change slows down very quickly. But the bulk of what's going on is the fact that in June last year, we had the exact low print in inflation. If you look at the CPI index itself. So a year later, even if it had gone back to where it was in, let's say, January of last year, it would have showed a massive gain. But because of the supply constraints and everything else, the gains look huge. But it's just year-on-year comparisons. So if we go out a bit further, we will see the rate of inflation come down anyway. So this was always going to be the high print, this June number, because of the comparison versus last year, and then incrementally it should soften. So this is what the Fed are talking about, transitory. And the actual truth is we don't know what's going to happen next year. And that's where the real debate should lie, not this year. This year, it's almost impossible to have generated meaningful sticky inflation. And my view for a long time, as most people who know me, is I'm generally a disinflationist. I don't believe you can generate structural inflation. I think that the monetary printing is a debasement issue, which is a different type of inflation than the CPI thing. So I'm going to show you some charts on how I'm framing this, just so we've got something to chat about. So if I'm going to share my screen now, this is some work I did from GMI. I wrote like 22 pages about inflation. And my conclusion is yes, there is commodity inflation. Yes, there's inflation somewhere, but generally, a lot of what we're seeing is fleeting because of the numbers. But I think there's another thing that I want to kind of own a bit, is the fact that I think that global growth is going to slow in the second half of the year, which is the surprise and is what I think the bond market is telling you.
Right, yes, that's where I want to go too. That's great.
So everybody's screaming, oh my God, bonds are manipulated. Can't you see the inflation's out of control? No, the inflation number's a false number. Where is the real rate of inflation in the economy? We currently don't know, so we can't really tell. But the bond market is saying, actually, the inflation pressure is easing off. Why? So I'm going to show you why. One is China has started slowing. So its credit cycle leads its PMI and its business cycle, and ISM follows, because China is actually the largest manufacturer in the world. So this actually drives a lot of the global business cycle now. It's not just the US. So we can see that the China economy has rolled over, and that tells us ISM later in the year should be peaking out too. Now, whether it's done it already or whether it lags a bit, not clear yet, but we'll find out. But it just tells me the balance of probabilities are that the US economy, so the ISM Purchasing Managers Survey, is correlated to GDP, suggests that the peak of this post-recovery bounce is in, and that's normal, and I'll come on to that in a bit. It's actually normal to see a slowdown after the initial recovery. The Citibank Economic Surprises Index for China, which is a measure of their economic data coming out better or worse than expected, is now coming out significantly worse than expected versus economists' forecasts. That's another measure to say China's slowing down faster than people expected, which was that previous chart. What's interesting is the US is starting to see the same. So its Economic Surprises Index has just hit 0, and it's likely to go negative, which tells us the economists are going to have over-forecasted growth, which is what the bond market's starting to tell us, because yields have started falling, in the middle of this big inflation print. Because bonds look forward and try and speak the truth about the economy. But there's some structural issues that haven't gone away. In this, and I've talked about this for a long time, part of the solvency thesis is the fact that people aren't going to get jobs back again. Not that, I mean, I know there's a record amount of job ads out there, but the reality is there's a jobs mismatch now, because not all of this retail jobs are coming back. There's whole swathes of the economy that's not coming back. And so we can see that the US employment population in the labor force is actually below it was, at the lowest level it's been for a very, very long time. And that's concerning. People are basically coming out of the economy. That's also to do with baby boomers retiring, because they can't get a job again. If they got laid off, the chance of a baby boomer at 65 years old getting a job is pretty close to zero now.
Right,
so,
unless they go to McDonald's, right.
That's right. So they're coming out of the labor force, and that's deflationary because they now have a fixed amount of assets to be able to live off. So they tend to spend less. So it tends to be highly deflationary. Also, in the midst of all of that is the fact that we've also got these all of the various things that stop people having to pay rent or getting other subsidies and payments on mortgages. All of this stuff all comes back with a vengeance from now until the end of the year. So a lot of people who've been used to a spending pattern that had more incremental income are suddenly going to find they've got less, probably slower for growth. And I don't know if the labor force participation rate, which is another way of looking at, how many people are actually in America or in the workforce, it's super, super low as these baby boomers come out and the structural unemployment. And that's leading to velocity of money remaining extremely subdued. They're very correlated to the baby boomers because they tend to save assets, put them in a pension plan, or save them and not spend them, and it tends to lead to low inflation. So those things haven't gone away. Also, if I look at the chart of bond yields going back to 1962, every time we've had a recession, there's been a little spike in bond yields afterwards. And that's the rebound, inflation's coming, oh my God phase. That happens every time. It's behavioral because they see this economic data coming out stronger because it's versus the comparison of the previous dip. And what happens is that inflation dies very quickly.